What's up, folks? This your boy Darko, Kindles and Kicks. Let's get into it. All right, so today I am listing my top 8 most memorable reads of 2024. Yeah, I didn't do 10, 15, 20. First of all, I only read 35 books in 2024, which I know is far less than a lot of other booktubers who read like 80, 90, 100, or even more. Like some people be having like 300 books in 1 year, which is insane. Nah, not the brother. I got 35 books under my belt in 2024, and I read a lot of phenomenal books, but these particular 8 stood out in my mind for various reasons, and not the reasons that most people would think, at least in my opinion. You can agree or disagree. Let me know in the comments. All right, so let's get to it. All right, so my 8th most memorable read is Lonesome Dove. Now, this book is unique on this list because I didn't give it 5 stars. I didn't love it and find it as amazing as so many other booktubers who have it listed as one of their favorite, if not their ultimate favorite reads of all time. Not for the kid. And the reason is for the things in this book that made it memorable for me. It wasn't the characters, at least not all of them. It wasn't the plot. It wasn't the world. No. The most memorable thing about this book that has stuck with me is the damn racism. Like, so this is my introduction into Western culture. I've never watched any Western films, watched any Western TV shows, or read any Western books before Lonesome Dove, so I had no idea what I was getting into. I thought I was going to escape into a world of cowboys and sheriffs. No, this story, yes, it's brutal, and it's about a bunch of cowboys on a journey, and it's a lot of sadness and death and heartache, but there are some episodes of effusive and unapologetic racism that to me is painful to read. And it's something that no one has mentioned. Not any booktuber or any review I've read has mentioned that. There is a particular scene in this book where a prostitute is listing off her sexual escapades and talking about her previous clients. And the guy is listening, and she gets pretty graphic. However, the thing that offends him the most about her previous sexual trysts is the fact that she slept with a black man, or an N word, as he says it in the book. And I'm like really? Like out of all the things she listed, that's the most offensive? And then there is a point in the book where like a cowboy actually admits that he can't talk to the black character in the book named Dietz, who is an awesome character, but one of the cowboys refuses to talk to him because he was raised not to talk to N words. And then the worst scene by far, I think, in the book is when a freaking horse thief is about to be hanged. And the person tasked to hang him is the black character Dietz. And he just lashes him and lobs at him some seriously degrading and profane racial epithets. Some of the worst I've ever read in any book or seen in any movie, and I was just not expecting it. It was so ridiculously painful to read. I had to put the book down. I couldn't read anymore for the rest of the day. Now, if I had been told that there was some racism in this book before reading it, I would have made a better decision on whether to read it or not. Or at least I would have had an idea of what I was getting myself into. However, I was not prepared for it. Now, I'm not saying this book is just riddled with racism because it's not. I mean, the crux of the story is about all these cowboys, but the point of view of the world is through a bunch of cowboys who are white at that. And so they see the world in a very skewed way. And to me, it was just hard to read at times. And it's not just black people, it's Native Americans in here and it's Mexicans mentioned. And all of them are not made to look that great in the eyes of these cowboys. So I just caution any person of color, particularly if you're black, and you read this book, just be warned. There's some episodes of racism that may prove to be hurtful, at least in my opinion. So that to me took away the enjoyment of the book for me, but I can't deny that it left an indelible mark on my brain that I will not forget anytime soon. Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. All right, so my seventh most memorable read is Words of Radiance by Brando Sando. So, Stormlight Archive is my third favorite series of all time. Can't tell you the other two because I want to do a list of my favorite series and I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, Stormlight Archive, I got into, gosh, like 10 years ago. I mean, it was a minute when. It hasn't been out that long, like whenever the first book was released that year. And I reread the books every time a new one is released. I'm in the middle of a reread now because of the Wind and Truth release. So I've read Words and Radiance like 4 times now, I think. And previously, I did not appreciate Kaladin as a character, okay, because I thought he was just depressing and overly maudlin and self-pitying, and he just really just got on my nerves. However, during this reread, his experience and his view of life in general really resonated with me more because I have been through some things the last several years that have made me relate to Kaladin. Like now I understand what it's like to have so many people relying on you that you're literally a single point of failure in so many systems, whether it's a friendship system, a family system, a work system, like you are the most dependent person. And if you don't come through, nobody else will. And the weight of that and having to carry that and to constantly worry about failing and beating yourself up when you can't meet others' expectations or if you can't meet your own expectations. It is very difficult to endure at times. It causes depression, it causes anxiety, it causes self pitying. And now I get Kaladin. I understand him 100%, and never before had I understood him like I did when I read Words of Radiance this time. So yeah, I have to apologize for all my Kaladin hate. Bro, I get it. Like you have a lot riding on you. You put a lot on yourself, which a lot of us tend to do. And sometimes we put unrealistic expectations upon ourselves. And when we don't meet them, we feel like it's our fault when it just could not be helped. Like it's just life. So Kaladin, I see you, bro. You are now one of my favorite characters in the Stormlight Archive. All right, next to my boy Dalinar. That's my man. All right, my number six most memorable read is Dungeon Crawler Call by Matt Denneman. So I was introduced to this book by Brian Bell over at BellTube. He did a lit RPG starter guide, and this book was mentioned. And I remember even commenting on the video and asking him where is a good place to start if you're just getting into lit RPG. And he recommended DCC. Okay. So I didn't know what I was getting into. I downloaded the audiobook, which so many people recommend, and I recommend it as well. The audiobook is great. And from the beginning, like I enjoyed myself. From the very first scene, I found myself chuckling. And as I got more into this book, I realized the comfort it was providing me. So at the time I read this book, I was mourning the loss of one of my favorite beings in the world, my cat, Blanche. Okay, so, or me and my husband's cat, I should say, but she was my baby. She passed away um like a few months before I read this book, and it was very difficult losing her. Like any pet lover knows that when you lose a pet, a cat, dog, whatever, it is like losing a family member because you love them just like you love a family member. And sometimes it's even deeper because you care for this, you care for and you are responsible for this living thing, and they rely on you for so much, and you rely on them for emotional support and to bring you joy and to comfort you during times of hardships. I mean, animals provide a lot that people just don't understand who aren't animal people. Okay. So me and my husband lost Blanche. It was a hard loss for both of us. But reading about the cat in this book, her name is Princess Donut, brought me so much comfort and joy because she reminded me so much of my cat, Blanche. The way she carried herself, her sophistication, and if my cat Blanche could have talked, she would have been Princess Donut 100,000%. And it was so wonderful to read this book during my time of loss because it just made me so happy because I felt like Blanche was there with me as I was reading this book. So thank you, Matt Denneman. Like, you have no idea what you did for me during my time of loss. And also, not to mention, Princess Donut is a Gossip Girl fan. I don't care what anyone says. Gossip Girl is one of my favorite shows of all time. I rewatch it regularly. So shout out to anybody who loves Gossip Girl. All right, Dungeon Call Crawl by Matt Denneman. Please check it out. All right, my next most memorable read is Finding Me by Viola Davis. So, anyone who watches films is probably familiar with Viola Davis. I mean, she is a Golden Globe, Academy Award winning, amazing actress. And she recently released a memoir, which I read last year, and it blew me away. So, just for disclosure, or to be a little personal, like I grew up in the hood. I was raised by a single mom who was a social worker, so we weren't the wealthiest of people. We did okay. My mother did her best to give me all I needed and all I wanted. And so a lot of times when people grow up in certain circumstances and they quote unquote make it, they have a chip on their shoulder because they beat the odds. And I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I have a chip on my shoulder because not only was I raised by a single mother, I grew up in the hood. I had friends who went to jail, got shot. I had health challenges I've been through, and I'm still here standing. And and sometimes that can make me a bit arrogant, especially when I compare myself to others. Because sometimes I feel like, hey, there's no excuse for you to be this way because I went through all this and now look at me. Viola Davis sat me down and humbled me because what she endured or what she went through, I could not even imagine surviving. This woman grew up in a house with at times no heat, no air, no food. She had no clothes and no coat in the winter. Sharing a bed with her siblings, and they all peeing on the bed, going to school with clothes smelling like urine. The woman went through it all. She was abused, but she still survived and thrived to become one of the greatest actresses of all time. So, who am I to be arrogant in any way when I did not survive any kind of circumstance like that? And she still made it beyond her wildest dreams, and still is here, healthy enough to tell the story. to inspire others or humble others like myself. So, anybody, if you need a wake up call about life, please read Finding Me by Viola Davis, because I guarantee you will not have a single complaint about your life when you read her story. All right. My next most memorable read is A Song for Our Bone by Guy Gabriel K, or GGK, as a lot of people call him. So, this was my first GGK book I read. I was introduced to it by Josh over at Red Fairy Books, who had it listed, I think, as his favorite read of 2023. So I wanted to try historical fantasy, so I started with this. And I am so glad I did. This book is one of the most beautifully written pieces of writing I've ever read in my entire life. Now, I'm not going to get into plot and all that. Like, please feel free to research the book. There are a lot of people who are talking about it, there are a lot of reviews about it. But what touched me about this book is that it evoked emotion, not just because of a particular character arc or story arc, but just from the sheer beauty of the writing. Like, I've never had an author make me emotional just because the way they constructed the sentence was so gorgeous and so beautiful that I just couldn't stand it. I couldn't take it. Have any of you ever heard a song that immediately just evokes emotion or brings like something out of you? Like, for example, My Immortal by Evanescence is one of my favorite songs of all time. Every time I hear it, like, I just start to get misty eyed because when I discovered it, I was just going through a lot. At that age, and it just brings back all these kind of memories, and it's just a beautiful song. And Song of Our Bond, coincidentally, which is a book about music, is so lyrical and so poetic. And GGK just has a way of crafting prose that is just unbelievably phenomenal. It's almost majestic. And I encourage everybody to read A Song for All Bond, if not for the beautiful world it's written in and the wonderful characters he has in it, but just to see what it's like to read beautiful writing. I mean, beautiful, flawless. I don't have one critique. Never have I experienced anything like this before. And he is now one of my favorite authors of all time, one of my favorite writers of all time, because it's absolutely ridiculous how this man can put words together. All right, my next most memorable read of 2024 is A Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. So this book was introduced to me, and I'm sure like everybody on BookTube, by Evie. And she also gifted me the book. So thank you, Evie, so much. One of the best gifts. And it was autographed by Simon Jimenez himself. This book took me back to my childhood immediately. I mean, it's all about oral histories, which is how historically stories have been passed on. And I remember being a kid in my neighborhood and listening to my mom, my grandma, my babysitters, my older community members and neighbors, and hearing the stories about this old town, hearing stories about my family from decades or 100 years ago, and how what they did influenced or affected me today. And in fact, there was at one point a play done about a part of history that I had been told about my entire life. So this book really resonated with me because the main character is hearing these stories and then he watches a play come to life from these tales. And I went through the exact same thing. And another standout about this book is how wonderfully and beautifully gay relationship is handled. So, what a lot of people don't understand is when you're a gay man in America, you frequently go through or experience unrequited love. Because unlike heterosexuals, someone like myself as a young person, even now, like although I'm married, if I was single, I can't go up to anybody who I find attractive or interesting and express that attraction or interest like someone who is a heterosexual. If you see another girl or a guy who you might want to take out on a date, you can approach them and ask. And the only repercussion you may get is a polite or effusive declination, or you may get slightly humiliated. Maybe they'll yell at you, who knows? But if you're a gay man and go up to another man who you are unsure about and express interest or attraction, you may get killed. So you have to be very careful how you navigate in this world when you're living as a gay man. So this book handled that very well of how you kind of dip your toe in the water and see if the person is interested. Sometimes it's a little give and take. You might throw some little hints out there, they'll throw some hints back, and it's a little back and forth, and then there's hot and cold, and it's all kind of drama, and it's a huge and arduous process that a lot of gay men go through. And so I was so happy to feel seen here in Simon Jimenez's book because I had never read anything like that before, and he handled it beautifully. So I appreciate that, Simon Jimenez, for allowing all of us gay men to be seen in your novel. Okay, my penultimate most memorable read of 2024 is Memories of Ice by Stephen Erickson. So I am in the middle of a Malazan read. Memories of Ice is the third book in this series. And yes, the story is amazing. The world is gargantuan. The characters are believable and relatable. The magic system is incredible. But what really stands out to me is how I felt afterward, because in this book, it really shows you the importance of accepting your responsibility, even if it's a burden. Because at times, you may have the weight of the world on your shoulders. And for whatever reason, life, the universe, God, Allah, Buddha, whoever you believe in, like even if it's just random coincidence, like whatever you believe in, for whatever reason, this weight that needs to be carried has been assigned to you because you are the only person strong enough to carry it. And you have to accept that responsibility, because if you run away from it, others will suffer. Now, this is funny because this is my second time reading this book. And it's interesting how life experiences changes your perspective about things. And my life experience changed my perspective about this book. Like now I know or understand that even when I feel overwhelmed with tasks and burdens, maybe it's because I am the only one who can handle it. And if I allow someone else to, it could hurt others. And I can't allow that to happen. So if this is my calling, or if this is my cross to bear, or if this is my lot in life, it is my duty to accept it graciously and move on and do my best carrying this load for others because no one else can do it. Okay, so my number one most memorable read of 2024 should not come as a surprise to anybody who has watched my channel. and that is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. And this was a buddy read I did with my boy, my little bro, some Okie dude, aka Britain, or it's Britain, aka some Okie dude. um, so he invited me to read along with him. And I was so happy I did because it was interesting me being a black guy reading it and him being a white guy and comparing notes and our experience on it. However, the most amazing thing about this book is how it made me feel about myself. So often in school, growing up, just in life, you learn about Black history through a very distant lens because you're just reading it in a book or you're listening to a lecture. But this book put me right into the perspective of someone who was living as a slave but born modern day. And to think of me in 2025 being transported back in time as a slave, I could not imagine how I would handle it or what I would do. And it helped me to be not so judgmental of people back then. For example, we have a saying in the Black community called Uncle Tom, which is a term used to describe a Black person who we feel betrayed Black people as a whole or sold out Black people as a whole to the quote unquote white man. That term is a carryover from a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, and it's about a slave who people consider a little too deferential to his slave owner. However, reading this book, I now understand that so often these people had no choice. They were just trying to survive. And if they sold out their next man so they could live, or so their son or daughter could live, or their husband or their wife could live, who am I to judge them? Because if any of us was put into a position like that, I'm sure we would all fold because slavery was one of the worst atrocities inflicted upon a Black body. What this book made me realize is that me as a Black man today in 2025 cannot in no way relate to a Black man in 1825 or 1725. And it helped me appreciate the sacrifices those people made to ensure that I had the freedoms I have today. No matter what's happening in this country right now, I have more freedom to do what I want or need to do than anybody did 200 or 300 years ago. So it taught me to be more thankful, to be more appreciative, and to be more intentional in my respect and appreciation for my ancestors in the past. Because not only did they die for me to have these freedoms, they suffered. I mean, they suffered brutally. You're talking about being beat, being raped, being tortured, and being starved and treated like nothing. Me, I don't know what that's like at all. And this book taught me that I don't and I should never act like I do. Because it is my job to recognize what they did and to do better to ensure what they endured wasn't in vain. So, Octavia Butler, that book changed my life. It changed something in me fundamentally. I'm a different person since reading that book. So, I appreciate Britain for reading along with me and anybody who recommended that book or put that book on my radar. I just mad I hadn't read it sooner, but I think I read it at the right time. And I think if anybody reads this book, it'll change them for the better as well. All right. So, yeah, that's my number one. Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. Can't recommend it enough. So, those are my top 8 most memorable reads of 2024. Feel free to list some of yours. And feel free to comment on any of the books I mentioned. If you read them, if you had a different experience, similar experience, if you can relate, let me know. I appreciate all of you watching. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe. This is Darko, Kindles and Kicks. See you next time. Peace.
Hello, this is Kayla.